There are moments in history when humanity stands at a threshold, unsure whether it is awakening or descending further into sleep. We live in one of those moments now, a time when technology, politics, and ideology have woven such a convincing illusion of freedom that few dare to ask whether the freedom is real. In this film, you are invited to look beyond the headlines, beyond the noise, beyond the stories that have been carefully constructed to shape what you believe. Stay until the end, and you will see how power hides behind democracy, how fear is manufactured to keep populations obedient, and how control is expanding in ways that most have never imagined. Before this journey ends, we will walk through the machinery of perception itself, the systems that mold thought, rewrite history, and weaponize language. You will discover why every major crisis follows the same pattern, why chaos is always followed by order, and why that order always benefits the few. We will explore how information has become the new battlefield, how science and technology are used not merely to serve humanity, but to redesign it, and how ordinary people are slowly being conditioned to accept a digital prison built in the name of convenience. We will follow the thread of control through media, education, and economics until its true purpose is revealed. And most importantly, you will hear of the awakening now spreading quietly across the world, an awakening of perception, of courage, of consciousness itself. Because while systems of control grow stronger, something far more powerful is emerging. The human being remembering what it means to be free. This is not a story of despair. It is a story of revelation. The truth is not comfortable, but it is liberating. It breaks illusions, but it also rebuilds meaning. So stay with this journey to its final moment, because somewhere between the lines, between the whispers of history and the echoes of the present, you may begin to see the pattern that connects everything. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There will come a part in this film where you realize how the illusion of choice has replaced true freedom, where you recognize how fear has been used to make people beg for their own confinement. Later, you will hear how the war for your perception is being fought silently, not with weapons, but with information, and how awakening begins the moment you stop reacting and start seeing. And when the final chapter arrives, you will understand why awareness itself is the ultimate act of rebellion, and why freedom has never been something granted by rulers, but something remembered by souls. What you are about to hear is not opinion. It is a mirror, one that reflects the system we have built and the consciousness that can dissolve it. Listen closely, because once you begin to see the hidden architecture of control, the world will never look the same again. The world is changing, but not in the way we've been led to believe. Beneath the noise of politics, the chaos of markets, and the endless distraction of entertainment, a quiet structure is forming. One designed not to serve humanity, but to dominate it. What we are witnessing is the emergence of a system that echoes the darkest blueprints of history. A global version of totalitarian control, polished, digitized, and disguised as freedom. The methods once confined to dictatorships now operate behind the facade of democracy, hidden in plain sight, justified by necessity. Fascism has returned, not with marching boots and flags, but through legislation, algorithms, and ideology. It does not announce itself as tyranny. It arrives as protection, as progress, as order. It promises safety from chaos while quietly constructing the cage. The visible faces of leadership, the presidents, prime ministers, and parties that rotate on our screens, are not the architects of power. They are the actors of a carefully staged performance, each reading lines written long before they took the stage. The real decisions, the real agendas, are crafted far above the level of parliaments and congresses. Every 4 years, the faces change, the slogans change, but the direction remains the same. New governments inherit the same policies, the same wars, the same economic structures, and call them progress. The illusion of choice keeps the population occupied, while the machinery of control continues uninterrupted. Those who serve the agenda are rewarded, for a time. When they cease to be useful, they are removed, replaced, forgotten. History remembers their names, but not the invisible hands that positioned them there. Behind the curtain operates a network that transcends nationality, a convergence of financial elites, corporations, intelligence agencies, and ancient secret alliances. Their objective is not wealth alone. Wealth is merely the tool. Their goal is power, pure, permanent, planetary power. The blueprint is simple: a single world government, a central global bank, a unified digital currency, a universal army, and a population tracked and controlled at every level. This architecture of control is not a prediction. It is unfolding. Regional unions, the EU, the OAS, the AU, the GCC, the PIF, the APSE, and others are the stepping stones. Each erodes national sovereignty a little more, until what we once called countries are reduced to administrative districts of a global authority. The further decision-making drifts from the people, the less those decisions reflect their will. And when power moves far enough away, accountability disappears entirely. That is the purpose of centralization, not efficiency, but control. The European Union has already become a model of this design. Unelected bureaucrats dictate laws that override the will of entire nations. Regulations seep into every corner of life, justified by unity, safety, or progress. But unity without freedom is not civilization. It is submission. The same pattern spreads elsewhere. International trade agreements that bind nations to corporate law, surveillance treaties that transcend borders, financial institutions that dictate policy to governments through debt. The sovereignty of nations is being quietly dissolved, piece by piece, vote by vote, under the banner of global cooperation. This is how empires evolve. Where once armies conquered with swords, now contracts conquer with signatures. The empire no longer needs colonies. It owns everything through finance. And behind the political theater stands the old symbol of fascism itself, the fasci, a bundle of rods bound together beneath an axe head. It represents the subjugation of the individual to the collective, of personal will to the state. That ancient emblem has resurfaced in the institutions that claim to champion liberty. It adorns walls of parliaments, seals of governments, and monuments of freedom, irony cast in stone. The message is clear. The structure of control has always been there, evolving with the times, adjusting its language, but never its purpose. Where once we fought tyrants with names and uniforms, we now face systems without faces, bureaucracies, banks, and digital networks that answer to no one. At the center of this transformation lies a dream long nurtured in the shadows, the complete digitization of humanity, the merging of biology and technology, the transformation of the citizen into the data point. Microchipping, once dismissed as science fiction, has entered public discourse through convenience and novelty. What begins as identification for animals then becomes a luxury for access, a trend for safety, and finally, a requirement for participation. The device that opens doors and tracks health records will soon hold currency, identity, and location. What was once optional becomes essential. What was once voluntary becomes mandatory. Beneath the surface lies a far darker potential: direct access to the human mind and body. Microchips can do more than store information. They can transmit and receive it. They can alter emotional states, influence thought patterns, and affect physical well-being. This is the final frontier of control. The human being transformed into a biological node of a digital network. Those who study this agenda warn that the microchip is not the end goal but the gateway, a bridge to full integration between human consciousness and artificial intelligence. The so-called Internet of Things will soon merge with the Internet of Bodies. Every thought, movement, and heartbeat recorded, analyzed, and influenced. This future is sold as innovation, as efficiency, as health. But the price is autonomy. And once that is lost, freedom becomes a memory. This is why control today operates through the totalitarian tiptoe, gradual, calculated steps that move society toward total domination without triggering resistance. Each new restriction, each new piece of legislation is presented as isolated and temporary. But when viewed from above, the pattern is unmistakable. A slow, steady march toward global centralization. We are told we must carry identification cards for security, surrender privacy for safety, accept surveillance for protection. Each measure alone seems harmless, reasonable even. Together, they form a chain. Control does not arrive overnight. It creeps. It advances through distraction, through complacency, through the belief that someone else is in charge, and someone else will stop it. And yet, behind this creeping control lies something deeper. A philosophy, an ancient idea that the few have the right to rule the many. That humanity cannot govern itself. That order must be imposed from above. The same ideology that fueled the empires of Rome and the Reich has simply evolved into modern institutions. It wears suits instead of uniforms, speaks the language of economics instead of war, and calls itself democracy while operating as dictatorship. This is how the world drifts into darkness, not through conquest, but through consent. Because when people surrender awareness, they surrender freedom. And once awareness fades, tyranny does not need to take power. It is given. Freedom, after all, is not lost in a single moment. It erodes quietly, law by law, generation by generation, until its absence feels normal. This is how global fascism rises, not with violence, but with applause. Power rarely reveals its true face. It hides behind institutions, logos, and language, wearing masks of legitimacy so convincing that most never think to look behind them. Modern control does not shout orders. It whispers through policy, regulation, and the soothing voice of authority. The ancient empires ruled through conquest. Today's empires rule through consent, manufactured, managed, and maintained by those who understand that perception is more powerful than force. When people believe they are free, they no longer resist. The system that governs modern civilization is not a single government or nation. It is a network, a web of influence that spans continents, woven together through banks, corporations, intelligence agencies, and think tanks. Its purpose is not public service, but preservation of hierarchy. The pyramid of power remains, the few above, the many below. At the base of the pyramid stand billions of people who labor, consume, and obey. They feed the machine through their energy, time, and belief. Above them are layers of management, politicians, executives, officials, rewarded for loyalty and silence. And at the top, beyond the reach of public scrutiny, exist those who dictate direction while remaining unseen. Their names rarely appear in news headlines. They are not elected, and yet their influence shapes the fate of nations. To keep this structure intact, two mechanisms are essential: ignorance and dependence. Ignorance ensures that people cannot see the prison. Dependence ensures they will not want to leave it. Ignorance is maintained through the institutions we trust most: education and media. From the earliest years, children are taught what to think, not how to think. Curriculums present history as a series of accidents rather than a sequence of deliberate designs. They teach obedience disguised as order, competition disguised as progress, and nationalism disguised as pride. By adulthood, most people have memorized enough to function, but forgotten how to question. They enter the workforce as compliant participants in a system they never consented to create. The media then takes over where education ends. Television, news, entertainment, all synchronize to reinforce the same worldview. It tells people what is normal, what is desirable, and what is dangerous. Every story is a subtle reminder that authority knows best. The language of control is repetition.
If a lie is told often enough, it becomes truth in the collective mind.
When every outlet repeats the same narrative, dissent sounds like madness. That is the brilliance of propaganda. It makes conformity feel like sanity. Information that threatens the established order is marginalized, mocked, or buried beneath noise.
And in a world of endless distraction, silence becomes impossible.
The population is kept busy, scrolling, watching, reacting, never reflecting. The mind is fed a diet of trivia while the soul starves for meaning. Dependence, the second mechanism, is cultivated through economics. Money is not simply currency, it is control. Those who create it control those who must earn it. Modern money is debt, created not by governments but by private institutions that lend it into existence at interest. Every loan, every mortgage, every national deficit is a shackle that binds the borrower to the lender.
Nations compete, economies rise and fall, but the debt remains, eternal, expanding, unpayable.
Through this invisible system, entire populations are enslaved without chains. People wake, work, and worry for numbers on screens, believing them to be real. Yet these numbers are conjured from nothing and return to nothing, while lives are spent in pursuit of them. This is not economics, it is alchemy, the transmutation of human energy into control. The same principle governs the digital world. Technology promises liberation but delivers surveillance. Every device we use, every application we download, every account we create becomes a window into our behavior. What we buy, what we read, where we go, and even what we think can be mapped, analyzed, and predicted. The new gold is data, and humanity itself is the mine.
The Internet, once hailed as a tool for freedom, has become the most efficient surveillance grid in history.
The screen is both window and mirror. It watches as we watch. Control through technology is elegant because it feels voluntary. We choose to carry tracking devices in our pockets. We install listening devices in our homes. We trade privacy for convenience, not realizing that convenience is the bait. And behind every innovation lies an agenda, the gradual merging of humanity and machine. Artificial intelligence, biometric identification, digital currencies, and genetic modification converge into a single ecosystem of control. Once currency is digital and identity is stored on a global ledger, dissent will no longer require punishment. It will simply be deleted. History's tyrants would envy the efficiency of this new order. No soldiers needed, no prisons built, only algorithms.
Disobedience will not be punished through violence, but through invisibility.
Those who question too deeply will find their access denied. No account, no travel, no transaction. Freedom will exist only for those who never test its boundaries. But control does not end with economics or surveillance. It reaches deeper, into the human body and mind.
Modern medicine, once rooted in healing, has become an industry of dependence.
Chemical solutions replace natural balance. Symptoms are treated while causes are ignored. Health is not restored, it is managed. And in the management lies profit. The same corporations that manufacture sickness through polluted air, processed food, and chemical additives then sell the cure. Their influence shapes research, policy, and education. Doctors become sales representatives, patients become customers, and wellness becomes a brand. Beyond medicine lies the manipulation of biology itself. The genetic code, the sacred language of life, is being rewritten in laboratories owned by private interests. The promise is abundance, disease, resistance, progress. The result is dependence, sterility, and control over the food supply itself. When seeds are patented and species engineered, nature becomes property. And whoever owns nature owns humanity. Control has expanded into the unseen frequencies of existence. The electromagnetic spectrum that once carried only communication now carries influence. Waves invisible to the eye pass through every cell, every mind, every moment. We are surrounded by a field of artificial frequencies that interfere with our natural rhythm, disrupting the body's energy systems and the mind's clarity. Yet this, too, is dismissed as coincidence. Because the modern religion is science, not the pursuit of knowledge, but the worship of authority. We no longer question, we believe. We no longer observe, we obey. Real science is exploration without agenda. But the science of power is selective, confirming what benefits control and dismissing what threatens it. Thus, the system perpetuates itself through self-policing belief. The masses no longer need guards. They guard each other through ridicule and shame.
A society that mocks those who question authority will never need chains to remain enslaved.
And so the pyramid stands, stable, silent, and unseen. At its base, humanity lives, works, and dreams, unaware that its labor sustains its own captivity. Above, the architects watch, adjusting policies, triggering crises, and feeding both sides of every conflict. Their motto is order from chaos. They create the chaos and sell the order. This is how control evolves. Through layers of illusion, each one convincing enough to be mistaken for truth. And when the illusion is complete, slavery is called freedom, surveillance is called security, and obedience is called virtue. The system does not fear violence, it fears awareness. For awareness is the one force it cannot regulate, predict, or suppress. Awareness turns citizens into observers, and observers into participants in their own liberation. But awareness requires courage. The courage to see what has been hidden, to accept that comfort was the cost of control. And that realization marks the beginning of the end for any empire built on deceit. Because once the human mind sees the pattern, it cannot unsee it. And once it awakens, it cannot return to sleep. Every era has its wars, but the most decisive battles are never fought on soil. They unfold inside the human mind. Perception has become the new territory of conquest, and truth the most valuable resource on earth. Those who shape perception rule reality itself. They do not need to rewrite the laws of nature. They only need to convince people that their version of the world is the only one that exists. When perception is controlled, freedom becomes irrelevant. The architects of power understand this perfectly. They know that to dominate a population, one must dominate its sense of possibility. The mind must be taught to confuse obedience with virtue and fear with wisdom. To accomplish this, they employ a formula as old as politics itself. Problem, reaction, solution. First, they manufacture the problem. A crisis so sudden, so alarming, that logic is paralyzed. Then, they amplify the public's reaction through fear. Images of destruction loop endlessly until emotion replaces reason. And finally, they offer the solution, the very policy or restriction that would have been unthinkable before the manufactured event.
Wars, pandemics, economic collapses, all become instruments of redesign.
With every crisis, people surrender another fragment of freedom in exchange for the promise of safety. Each step seems reasonable in isolation, but the pattern reveals intent. When the towers fall, when the markets crash, when the sirens wail, new laws appear overnight. Surveillance expands, speech contracts, and privacy becomes a memory. Fear does what tyranny never could. It makes obedience voluntary. Propaganda is no longer printed in pamphlets or shouted through loudspeakers. It flows through fiber optics, through social networks, through the glow of every handheld screen. It does not command, it suggests. It does not threaten, it entertains. The modern citizen scrolls through a curated reality, a collage of fear, outrage, and distraction designed to exhaust discernment. Opinions are algorithmically assigned. Outrage is scheduled. And in the noise, genuine understanding disappears. Censorship has changed its costume. Where once books were burned, now algorithms quietly erase visibility. Unapproved ideas are buried, not banned. drowned beneath oceans of trivia and irrelevance. The result is the same: silence. Even language itself has become a weapon. Words are redefined until they mean their opposite. Freedom becomes security. War becomes defense.
Surveillance becomes protection.
By corrupting language, they corrupt thought. For words are the architecture of perception. Education reinforces the spell. Children are taught not how to think, but what to repeat. History is trimmed and polished until it supports the present order. Heroes and villains are assigned according to political convenience. And each generation inherits not knowledge, but narrative. Those who question the narrative are isolated. They are called dreamers, radicals, or conspiracy theorists, labels designed to close minds before evidence can open them. Ridicule is the most efficient form of censorship, for it enlists the crowd as enforcer.
This psychological warfare creates a self-regulating society. Citizens monitor each other, ensuring no one strays too far from sanctioned thought.
Public discourse becomes a cage lined with mirrors. You can see infinity, but never escape. Technology has made this war total. Information travels faster than thought, and emotion spreads faster than truth. Artificial intelligence now edits memory itself, deciding what remains visible in the digital archive of humanity.
What disappears online soon disappears from history. The goal is not to convince everyone of one belief, but to fragment them into many.
Divide and rule remains the oldest strategy of power. When people argue endlessly over symptoms, they never identify the cause. Race against race, left against right, religion against religion. Each faction certain it is free, while unknowingly serving the same puppeteer. Unity would end the game, so division must be maintained. And still, the propaganda grows subtler. It speaks now of sustainability, equity, global responsibility. Noble words masking centralized control.
Fear of catastrophe replaces moral reasoning.
People comply not out of coercion, but out of guilt. They believe they are saving the world while surrendering it piece by piece. This is the perfection of psychological warfare, when manipulation masquerades as morality. Yet beneath the static, a frequency of truth persists. It hums quietly through those who refuse to surrender their intuition. Awakening begins not with information, but with honesty. The willingness to admit that much of what we know was never truly ours. It was implanted. And once that realization dawns, the spell begins to break.
The war on perception is the war for the human soul.
It is fought not with bullets, but with beliefs, not for territory, but for consciousness. And the outcome of that war will decide whether humanity becomes a network of programmed organisms or a collective of liberated minds.
Victory will not come through argument or protest, but through clarity, the quiet refusal to be hypnotized by fear.
For when enough eyes open, the illusion collapses under its own weight. There comes a moment when silence becomes unbearable, when the noise of deception can no longer drown the inner call for truth. That moment marks the turning of the tide, the birth of awakening. Awakening is not rebellion for its own sake. It is remembrance. It is the rediscovery of what was always known before the conditioning began. Every human being carries within them a spark of awareness untouched by propaganda or fear. It whispers in moments of stillness, reminding us that we are more than the roles we play, more than the numbers we chase, more than the stories we are told. The system thrives on forgetfulness. It keeps people busy so they never remember who they are. But when even a single person pauses long enough to look inward, a light ignites that no authority can extinguish. Awakening begins with observation, seeing the world without filters, hearing language without its manipulations, recognizing emotion without becoming its servant. It is the quiet study of patterns, who benefits, who suffers, and why. It is the willingness to hold uncertainty without fear. From that awareness comes responsibility. To see is to act, not with violence, but with vision. The awakened mind does not seek to destroy the system. It renders it obsolete by withdrawing participation. The machinery of control functions only because billions consent to fuel it. Every transaction, every click, every silent agreement keeps it alive. When consciousness shifts, the machine loses its power source. The rulers of old feared armies. The rulers of now fear awareness. Because an awakened population cannot be herded. It cannot be bribed with illusions or divided by fear. Real freedom begins internally. It is the mastery of attention, choosing where to direct the light of awareness instead of allowing others to direct it for you. Attention is energy, and energy creates reality.
When millions redirect their attention from fear to truth, the world itself rearranges.
This is why awakening is contagious. It spreads not through persuasion, but through presence. One clear mind silently invites others to clarity, as a candle ignites another without losing its own flame. The path of awakening is not easy. It demands the death of illusion, the loss of certainty, the willingness to walk alone through the fog of ridicule and misunderstanding. But beyond that fog lies an understanding so vast that fear dissolves in its light. When we awaken, we see that the divisions that once defined us, nation, race, religion, ideology, are fragments of a broken mirror. Behind them stands the same consciousness, observing itself through different forms. To harm another is to harm oneself. To liberate another is to expand one's own freedom.
The architects of control depend on separation.
They cannot operate in a world that recognizes unity. For unity is the end of manipulation. A humanity that remembers its oneness cannot be conquered. This recognition does not erase individuality, it sanctifies it. Each person becomes a unique expression of the same infinite field, free to create without fear, to question without shame, to live without permission. From this awareness, new systems will emerge, not imposed from above, but grown from below, rooted in cooperation rather than competition, transparency rather than secrecy, empathy rather than dominance. Such systems will value wisdom over wealth, creativity over control, and truth over convenience. The collapse of the old world is not a tragedy. It is a transformation. Every structure built on deceit must fall so that what is real can rise. The chaos we witness is not the end of humanity, but the shedding of its illusions. The awakening mind sees opportunity where others see destruction. It recognizes that every ending is also a beginning, that within crisis lies creation. Freedom has never been a gift. It is a state of consciousness. No law can grant it, and no force can remove it. It is reclaimed the moment one remembers who they are. As more awaken, the balance shifts. Control loses its audience. The spectacle of fear fades into irrelevance, and a quieter power begins to move through the world. The power of self-knowledge. In that knowledge lies the end of domination, for no one can rule those who have mastered themselves. The future is not written. It is imagined into being by those who dare to see beyond the program. Each thought of truth sends ripples through the collective field, dismantling illusions one by one. And when enough minds awaken, the game of control ends, not with revolution, but with revelation. The curtain falls. The actors step off the stage. The audience walks away. The world that emerges will not be built by governments or corporations,
but by consciousness itself. A civilization grounded in awareness,
compassion, and freedom. The question is no longer whether humanity will awaken. It is when. And for those who can already feel it, the rising clarity beneath the noise,
the pulse of something vast and alive moving through the chaos.
The answer is clear. The time is now. You have now heard the story that few dare to tell. A story not of conspiracy, but of perception. Not of hopelessness, but of awakening.
If the world seemed darker when this journey began, perhaps now you see that the darkness was only the absence of light.
The structures of control described here are real, but they are not eternal. Every empire falls the moment enough minds decide to see through it. And every illusion dissolves the instant awareness turns toward it. Awakening begins quietly, with a single question, a moment of doubt, a spark of curiosity that refuses to die. That spark has now been passed to you. What you do with it is what shapes tomorrow. If something in these words resonated, hold on to it, reflect on it. Because truth grows stronger when it is shared, and awareness expands when it is spoken aloud. By sharing what you have seen here, you become part of a larger current, a wave of consciousness rising above the noise, connecting those who refuse to live asleep. If this message stirred something in you, stay connected. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the next step in this exploration of truth and awakening. Share this film with those who are ready to see beyond the surface. And leave a comment below, not as a gesture to the algorithm, but as a signal to others who are awakening, so they know they are not alone. The world changes when enough voices unite in clarity. Not through violence or ideology, but through understanding. The next chapter of humanity will not be written by governments or corporations, but by individuals who remember their power to perceive. Let that remembrance begin with you. Let it guide how you see, how you act, and how you connect with others. Because every time you choose awareness over fear, every time you choose compassion over division, every time you choose truth over comfort, the system of illusion weakens.
The awakening has already begun. And if you've come this far, you are part of it.
So take a deep breath, look again at the world around you, and remember, control ends where consciousness begins. Freedom starts the moment you realize it was never taken from you, only forgotten. Until the next awakening, stay aware, stay human, and keep the light alive.